This is the DragonCon PreGame Show. Sponsored by the Dish Store of Columbus on News Radio 540
PreGame Show brought to you by the Dish Store of Columbus, your local Dish Network provider. All right, joining us by phone, he's legendary star of stage, film, TV, an Emmy and an Oscar winner, and he's going to be at DragonCon. It is Ernest Borgnine. Hello, sir.
How are you? God bless you, and all of your wonderful people out there. I'm having a ball right here.
You're always having a ball, aren't you?
Well, I tell you, I went through my physical yesterday, a yearly physical.
Right.
And I want to tell you, the only thing missing is, well, you know what, but other than that, I'm 94 years young.
And still going strong and still sharp as ever.
And I just finished a picture, and now I'm starting another one.
What's the picture you just finished? Is that the Snatched?
It's called The Man Who Shook the Hand of Vincent Fernandez.
Where you play Rex Page. Let's talk about that movie. You play a guy who wanted to be famous.
That's right.
But didn't quite make it there, which is, very much the opposite of you.
Yeah.
But this guy, he goes into the hospital, and because of someone that he met, everyone thinks he's famous.
That's right.
I love it. It's a great concept.
There is a Vincent Fernandez who is actually considered the Frank Sinatra of Mexico. Yeah, and I tell you, it was just marvelous. It was just I had a wonderful time doing it. I'm glad I got it over with, and it's going to be showing this sometime this next year, and providing, of course, people go to see it and if they remember it.
I'm sure they will. I'll definitely be there.
The hand of Vincent Fernandez.
I look forward to seeing it myself.
All right, Wes.
Let's talk a little bit about your early age. Now, you first went into the Navy. You did 10 years out of high school in the Navy, right?
Yeah, that's right. I didn't know what to do. My mother wanted me to go to college, and of course we lived in New Haven, so that meant probably going to Yale. But I had no idea of what I wanted to be. Didn't have a clue. So I finally got a job, believe it or not, during that wartime. Wartime. It wasn't wartime yet, but during the Depression of 1929. And it was still pretty bad. And I got a job working on a vegetable truck for $3 a week, and all the bananas I could eat.
Hey, that's all right.
And I got pretty sick of bananas.
I can imagine so. And then from there, you went on to the Navy.
From there, I saw a sign one day as we were traveling around in the city. I saw a sign that said, "Join the Navy, see the world." And I said, wow. Hey, there's an idea, and I can bring in some money for the folks, too, at the same time, And so I went down, and the fellow looked at me. He said, yeah. He said, you're a high school graduate? Yes, sir. Says, you're in pretty good shape? Yes, sir. And so he put me on a standby. And one day somebody showed up a little sick, and bam, he called me up, and he said, son, you're going to be in the Navy. I didn't realize that there were thousands of people really wanting to get into the Navy that time because of the fact that it meant 3 squares a day and they were getting paid for it.
Right.
And there were so many people that wanted in, just to get off the streets. And the Navy was very choosy at the time, so I was pretty lucky. I tell you, it made a man out of me, the whole thing of the wonderful Navy, and I can't say enough about what a young man should do to give a couple of years of his time to the service, and believe me, it would make an awful lot of people much happier today instead of just roaming around the streets.
Right. Well, I thank you personally for your 10 years of service. It was before my time, but of course that was a pivotal time for us. And we have a lot of listeners in Fort Benning, Georgia, so we have a lot of guys that you're able to speak to there about that. It's a lot different now, isn't it? Don't you find the military to be a lot different than it was then?
Oh, I should say. Oh, yes, of course, with all the different things that they've done. I mean, as far as I was concerned, it's an entirely new Navy. But what a Navy! We've got the best in the world, and without a doubt. And I think it's imperative that a young man give a couple of years to his country.
Now, you finished in the Navy, and then you took classes, and then you ended up on Broadway.
I finished up at the end of the World War II, and I went home, and my mother looked at me after a couple of weeks, and she said, well... Which meant, are you going to get a job or what? So I always went out looking for work, and I watched these fellas walking into these factories around New Haven, Connecticut, and it was just terrible. I mean, me being locked up in it, well, that's like going to jail. So one day I went home, and I was all set to rejoin the Navy. I said, the devil with it. I'll just back in and do my other 10 years and get a pension. At least I'll have something. And out of a clear blue sky, my mother looked at me. She said, what's the matter? And I said, and she said, have you ever thought of becoming an actor? She says, you always like to make a darn fool of yourself in front of people. Why don't you give it a try? I said, Mom, by golly, that's what I'm going to be. And 10 years later, somebody was handing me an Oscar.
Right. Moms seem to know, don't they? Moms have a way.
I tell you, boy.
Now, you mentioned the Oscar. That was 55. Did you ever imagine then that 54 years later you'd win an Emmy?
I have no idea, let alone winning an Emmy, but the Life Achievement Award, which is even more presumptuous. And I tell you, it's been wonderful. It really has. And I can't say enough about what my work has done and people coming up to you and Mr. Borgnine this, Mr. Borgnine. I say, Ernie, please, that's the name, Ernie. And, you know, they thank me for the hours that I've given them of pleasure. And what more can a person ask in life than doing that, than bringing something to people that make them laugh, make them think about other problems instead of their own for a while? That's what my mother told me. She said, you know, if you can make one person happy in the span of 24 hours, you've achieved a great deal. No, as far as the others are concerned, Marty won the Academy Award with. I said, this is my life. This is what happened to me. I was afraid to go and ask girls for a dance, let alone meet up with a person. You know what I mean?
Right.
What do you do? And, of course, I went on to get married 5 times, but not because I wanted to, you know, and not because I wanted to get married to get a divorce. That's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But things don't work out, and you know, thank goodness that they do have this business of people don't get along. Hey, let's call it a day, you know.
Is it true that you and Charles Bronson almost got arrested in Mexico because you stayed in costume and went to buy cigarettes?
We were on our horses, and we had some time off, you know. So we were going down to the cantina to buy some cigarettes, and we passed this truck, and it was loaded down with soldiers, all with rifles and everything else. They were looking for somebody, and so we went along. We were all dressed up in costumes, still, you know, from coming off the set. And suddenly we heard, Alto! And I looked around, and all these guys have their guns pointed at us.
Oh, wow.
Oh, boy. You talk about a couple of fellas that went ashen gray in a hurry. And Charlie and I, so momento, you know. Oh, golly. Well, we finally talked them into it, and they knew that we were actors and so on and so forth. But it wasn't the funniest thing in the world, I'll tell you.
I'm sure not at the moment. I have to mention Airwolf because that was a big part of my childhood.
Of course, you missed out on McHale's Navy, didn't you?
Well, I did, but I caught it in reruns.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, great. That's great. We had a lot of fun with that one, and it was like going back home again, you know what I mean? Like being in the Navy again. The Navy wouldn't have anything to do with us because they said, no, this is not the Navy. This is McHale's Navy. I said, of course it's McHale's Navy, you know. And then one day I got a notice to go to the Pentagon, and I had lunch with the Secretary of the Navy at the time. And I said, sir, this is wonderful, and I really appreciate it, but why? He says, you're the best recruiter we've ever had in the Navy.
Well, I've got to reference another part of my childhood, another thing that I was, and I'm still a fan of it, and it may not be, you know, the thing on your resume that you put first, but one of my favorite movies from the 80s was Super Fuzz. And I've got to ask you now, with all of these 80s films being remade and superheroes are in, is there any chance of a Super Fuzz reboot?
Oh, my goodness. I was made, I tell you, the fellow who was the director was an Italian director, and then just as crazy as a loon. But we had the greatest fun in the world, and he showed up when he wanted to show up, you know, and we'll wait at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he'd come in at around noon time, you know. Okay, let's go to work, and nobody questioned it, you know, and off we went. But it was fun. But it was more... I tell you, it was that kind of a picture. I wouldn't have given you 2 cents for it at the time, but my golly, it's become almost a legend, and people just love it. It's Super Fuzz. My goodness, it was one of those throwaways for me.
Well, some of the other work that you've done in the last few years, I guess you've done some voice work. All Dogs Go to Heaven, Pinky and the Brain, SpongeBob SquarePants.
How about that?
Fantastic.
When I say to the kids, either, you know, their heads jerk up and they're what happened? Who's that? Who's the Mermaid Man? That's it. I tell you, it's wonderful. It really is that. To bring joy to little people and all the way through to the old people. And God bless them. I've hit them all, and I'm so happy.
Can we talk about Red for just a minute?
Oh, yes, by all means. I tell you, what a wonderful man. When I first saw him on that television show that he was on, when they first came on, I said, by golly, that fella's going to go places. That was Bruce Willis. And I want to tell you, he did go places. And I always wanted to work with him. And then finally I got a chance to do it. And boy, it really is a wonderful man. And the nicest fellow you'd ever want to meet in person, you know, and just a great guy.
Great cast, and you could tell you guys had fun making it.
Oh, we did. We had a wonderful time.
You mentioned being 94. Any secrets on me making it to 94? Any tips?
Don't smoke. I gave up drinking. And as far as anything else goes,
moderation.
You only wish you could.
Well, sir, I really, Ernie, I'm sorry. I really appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to seeing you at DragonCon. I'll come up and shake your hand and say hi. And
yes, it's been a pleasure, and I thank you. We'll break some bread together. Best to all your listeners.
More DragonCon pregame show brought to you by the Dish Store of Columbus after this.
This is the DragonCon pregame show. Sponsored by the Dish Store of Columbus on News Radio 540 WDAK.